off. I feel like we're at the races now, and we're off. Right. I'm just going to wait, as you guys know, a couple of minutes, so I'm going to go live. But this is going to be a good one tonight, everyone, because it's going to really interest me, because I've got an underactive thyroid, and in the UK, they really don't deal with us correctly with thyroid, and especially having PCOS. So in a second, I'm going to introduce Ingrid here, or I'll get Ingrid to introduce herself just in a second. But how are you doing today, Ingrid?
Good. I'm so excited to be here. This is so fun. And, like I said, this is my first time ever going live. So this is like a fun new experience for me. But yeah, super excited to be here and to meet all your people.
It's perfect. Like I say, all the guys who are going to be watching, I'm sure you'll treat Ingrid like awesome. But if you have got any questions, please drop them just in the comment box. Now, we can't see who is asking them, but it's because of Restream. But just ask your questions, anything about Hashimoto's or even the thyroid, and we can answer them. Because like I say, I'm going to be learning things tonight too, because I want to stay in my lane. And Hashimoto's is a big thing for us women with PCOS. So hello, I'm just going to bring up the live here. So why don't people are here now, Ingrid? Why don't you let us know who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Ingrid. I am a Hashimoto's dietitian, and I have Hashimoto's myself. So I was diagnosed in 2006 at 17 years old. And back in the day, there was absolutely no help when it came to Hashimoto's. And truly the only reason why I was diagnosed is because my mom suffered so badly with Hashimoto's symptoms. She had miscarriages. She had, all sorts of, she went hyper and then hypo, and then they finally caught on to the fact that she had thyroid antibodies. She was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And so she kind of saw the telltale signs with me, luckily. So I was showing symptoms probably from the age of like 12 or 13-ish. Yeah. And then finally at 17, she was like, you know what, let's go get you tested. So she really pushed to get my antibodies tested, which was something we really didn't do, especially for people my age at that time. And so long story short, I was 17. I was freezing all the time, brain fog, like 6 months pregnant all the time, joint pain. I was a competitive swimmer. So I gained 55 pounds overnight and had to cram myself into the same Speedo because those things are expensive. So I certainly wasn't getting another one. So I was also looking into colleges and looking into school and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I grew up in Woodstock, New York, and it's an area that's very focused on doing things holistically and naturally and, focused on nutrition and herbs and all those things. So I knew nutrition had to do something for me, right? Yes. And when I asked my endocrinologist, she pretty much just like laughed in my face. So I'm like, okay, fine.
It's a big problem. Even all of ladies have probably experienced before.
Yeah. So long story short, I went to school to become a registered dietitian. Any chance I got to study autoimmune diseases, gut health, hormone regulation, all of that. I was able to do that. And because I went to a private school, so they really they emphasized kind of, focusing on the things that you personally wanted to focus on in your term papers and all of that. So I really got a great education there and became a dietitian, immediately started working with women who had Hashimoto's, which honestly, it was so funny because I took on people as like regular clients and I was like, I think you have Hashimoto's, let's test your antibodies. And they did. I'm like, this is just like fate, right? The universe just pushes in my direction.
Is it like, are you like me? Because I can tell a woman with PCOS a mile off, whether she be in the streets or, just out and about. I'm like, she's got PCOS.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, so I've been a dietitian for over a decade. I've had my own Hashimoto's in remission through the ups and the downs of life, for over a decade at this point. And, I think that's probably one of my biggest flexes in life is that I've been, thyroid antibody negative for over a decade.
It's very true. I think just even like for having PCOS or having Hashimoto's, I think almost you have to know what it's like going through it yourself as well. So then you can relate to the women and you know what to look out for. And then it's almost using yourself as a case study as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to say, like, one of the things that I really love about your content and one of the things that I think we're very aligned with, I mean, we're aligned on many, many things, but one of the things that I think that is so important is that life isn't always perfect. And we've been able to kind of take care of ourselves and keep our wellness optimized through the ups and the downs of life over the long term, right? That's what hasn't been like, oh, like I healed my Hashimoto's a year ago, so I know everything. It's like, no, I've been through so many things in life. And that's when people tend to like throw in the towel when things get tough. And I think that's why it's so important to kind of think of this again. Not protocols, but lifestyle.
Exactly. That's the foundations of the program that I have for PCOS. But what we'll do just in a second, though, Ingrid, I think it'll be really helpful for the women if we can make a rundown of like the signs for Hashimoto's and what it really entails and what it can do to you as well. But for the women watching, obviously it's PCOS centric, but for this, PCOS is an endocrine disorder, metabolic, but also through studies, they're now finding that it leads into autoimmune, which is what we're going to talk about, which is like your Hashimoto's, your fibromyalgia, your ME, all of these autoimmune disorders. So it's all linked, it all correlates together. So, but why don't you tell, because we are going to have a little bit about Ingrid's story as well, into about trauma, which is very interesting and how this leads into symptoms and how it makes you symptomatic. But I think just to help everyone, I think what we should do is discuss the actual symptoms and then what we can do about helping the women get tested. And then we can discuss a little bit about, you know, how to help it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll start with the most common symptoms first. And then of course there's all these little like quirky symptoms as well. And there is overlap, right? There's overlap with Hashimoto's symptoms to PCOS symptoms to even like perimenopause symptoms. So those things tend to overlap. So sometimes, you know, it's hard to kind of tease it out. And that's when it's really nice to get this diagnostic testing done, which I'll talk about in a minute. So main symptoms of Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, because so first I want to kind of back up if that's okay with you and kind of describe. So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease that affects your thyroid. So a lot of people on the internet will say, you know, well, it's not a thyroid problem. It's an immune system problem, right? Well, in effect, it's both because your body is attacking your own thyroid tissue. So when we're talking about Hashimoto's, we have to keep both of those things at the front of mind at the same time. We need to be thinking about how do we regulate your immune system and make it so that your body is not attacking its own tissue. And then we also need to be thinking like, okay, well, for most people who are diagnosed with Hashimoto's, the damage has already been done to your thyroid because those antibodies go up, they inflame the thyroid, they cause malfunction of the thyroid, right?
So just quick, I'm learning tonight as well, guys, just about, like you say, I stay in my lane. So does like women, especially with PCOS, is it diagnosed with underactive thyroid first? And then does that lead into Hashimoto's or?
It depends. So no, Hashimoto's generally leads into hypothyroidism. So people with Hashimoto's generally have Hashimoto's for decades before it's caught because doctors are only checking for TSH. Now, there are people now who are a little bit more educated about what Hashimoto's is and how it and your Hashimoto's antibodies can impact how you feel independent of your thyroid function, right? So those thyroid antibodies, when they're elevated, it can impact your body's inflammatory levels. So you can end up with systemic inflammation. We've researched studies that show that it can impact your quality of life, again, independent of your thyroid function. So the way that it goes is antibodies, autoimmune disease triggered, antibodies go up, inflammation to your thyroid, hypothyroidism.
All right. So just I'm kind of going to be like segueing. Sorry if we're not really got a plan tonight. It's all going to be unscripted, but this is where my brain works. So if you were diagnosed with, say, underactive thyroid, because like in the UK, I have been for many years diagnosed with that. So could I have been, just for other women's benefit too, could I have been Hashimoto's before that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So symptoms, because we haven't gotten there yet, I'll just quickly kind of rattle them off.
Yes.
So unexplained weight gain, that's a big one. That's usually why people get diagnosed, because they're like, I swear, women could be seriously clinging to life and not go to the doctor, but the second you gain 5 pounds without no reason to, and I get it. I'm the same way. But so fatigue, that massive fatigue, where you know, like when I first was diagnosed and I was in a flare, like the idea of getting up and walking 6 steps to make a pot of coffee literally made me sob, like that type of fatigue. Joint pain, hair loss, and usually the hair loss is more like hair thinning, because Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism can disrupt that hair regrowth cycle. Dry skin, eczema, like different skin issues, cystic acne, GI issues, so bloating, constipation. Let's see, there's so many.
The brain fog was the one for me. I couldn't read a book. I couldn't even, you know, concentrate to read a line or a sentence out of a book. It was that bad. Yeah,
absolutely. Same in college at the time, so that was fun.
So, but just like say, because obviously we're trying to keep this to a certain time tonight, but we will bring Ingrid back because there's so much that we can talk about. So what would people do to be diagnosed, or if they think they have Hashimoto's with that? What would they do to get that? Because in the UK, I was telling you just before we came on, all they do is test your TSH and your T4. They don't do anything else.
Yeah, for sure. And in the United States, we're slightly better than that. And you were saying that, you know, people that they don't that doctors don't even necessarily recognize Hashimoto's as a thing. And so we were talking about how I never used to get that comment on my socials before. And now all of a sudden I'm getting people that are saying that their doctors are telling them that Hashimoto's is not a thing. It is a legitimate diagnosis that has diagnostic testing, right? So what you would want to do is to check to see if you have Hashimoto's specifically, is you want to get your thyroid antibodies tested. So this is your TPO antibodies. So you would want to get that tested. If you do have a doctor that's a little bit more amenable to doing more things, most people would also benefit from getting a thyroid ultrasound, just to see what your thyroid's looking like, just to see what the inflammation in the tissue is looking like.
Unlikely to happen in the UK, I'm afraid. But if you go private, then of course, but normal doctors, absolutely not.
Yeah. And then, you know, in terms of testing to see where our thyroid function is in general, you know, you do want a TSH. The TSH though it's the thyroid stimulating hormone. So it's a communication between your pituitary and your thyroid, right? So it's not necessarily telling you what your thyroid function tests look like or what your thyroid hormones look like. So our thyroid hormones are our T4, which is our inactive thyroid hormone, T3, which is our active thyroid hormone. And so our body needs to convert that T4 into T3 to make it active, right? And so what I see a lot is people who are, you know, they're only testing TSH and T4. And, you know, that is what the standard of care is, right? And that's the standard of care. But when you take a T4 medication on top of it, a lot of times what can happen is, even if you're not converting that T4 to T3, your T4 and your TSH can look absolutely beautiful, but you can still feel like a walking dumpster fire.
But what's your stance sort of on the carb situation? Because I am very big for not cutting out carbs, especially because we need to, hopefully you agree with me, because we can have a debate, good, because we need the conversion of, carbs for conversion, right?
Yes, exactly. So we need carbohydrates for so many things. And I really, you know, so we need carbohydrates for the conversion of T4 to T3. We also need carbohydrates for our gut health, right? So those prebiotics are in our carbs. The fibers that we eat are through carbs. There's so many reasons to, you know, add in those carbs within reason, right? And opt for more like nutrient dense carbohydrates over processed carbs, of course.
Good, good. So, but what would you say, what is like the sort of, if a woman has got PCOS, and she's starting to get some symptoms like that, what would you advise a woman to do? What's the main cause for PCOS, do you think, for Hashimoto's? Because with my research, it's been like inflammation, and insulin resistance is a major one as well. So with your findings, obviously from being a dietitian, is that what you find as well?
No, I agree. I think it's inflammation. I think we don't have research on this yet, right?
No.
Like we don't really know. And it goes both ways, where people with Hashimoto's develop PCOS, people with PCOS develop Hashimoto's.
Yeah.
More women than men get Hashimoto's. So, and then of course, men are not going to get PCOS. So there's overlap there. It also, I think a lot of times women with PCOS are given birth control, hormonal birth control right off the bat. And that can cause nutrient deficiencies, which then can trigger, thyroid issues and Hashimoto's. So I think there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was just trying to help the women understand for that as well. So, and I think what they'll all find interesting is, how does Hashimoto's affect their fertility and trying to get pregnant in periods? But then I'd also like us to have some time to talk about the trigger, and what your experience is for that. So we can relate it back to fertility at the moment, because I know a lot of people watching would be interested in that.
Yeah, so we can absolutely, so that's a really, really great point, because I think, so this is something that I was actually talking with another PCOS dietitian about a couple of weeks ago, how the diagnostic criteria for PCOS could totally get effed up because of Hashimoto's, because of course, one of the diagnostic criteria is having absent period, having high androgens, which are two things that Hashimoto's can also kind of cause. So, it's really, really interesting. So in terms of fertility with Hashimoto's and hypothyroid, so your thyroid hormone has a role in every cell, tissue, and organ in your body, right? So when you when your body's not making and utilizing adequate thyroid hormone, this is also going to impact your sex hormones. It's going to impact your fertility. A lot of times women with Hashimoto's also end up having low progesterone, which can end up causing miscarriages. But another issue that I see a lot is women with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism are constipated. When you're not pooping, you're not detoxing your estrogen properly, and it becomes like this cycle, right? So having hypothyroidism can truly impact every system in your body.
Okay, so before we kind of go on to like the trauma side of things, what would be like your basic advice for everyone? So if they think they've got Hashimoto's, or they do have Hashimoto's, what is like the basic protocol that you would do? Like, being it, like, is it foods? Is it obviously supplements? A lot of people are always asking what supplements.
Totally. So first things first, I would, if your doctor is gaslighting you, try to find a new doctor. So that's number one. But in terms of like what I do, so I have 4 pillars. I think that it's easier for our brains to kind of think of things when they're like sectioned up and categorized. So I think, every day I think about my 4 pillars, right? So I think about, where's my stress level at? What can I do to reduce my stress? How can I adjust my mindset? How can I, move forward in the day, right? Because stress management is so incredibly important when it comes to our wellness overall, and then also when it comes to our thyroid health and Hashimoto's health. So that's pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is nutrition. So what I recommend for nutrition, I have a big emphasis on blood sugar regulation. So if you're someone with PCOS, they're working with you already, you're 10 steps ahead. If you're eating consistently throughout the day, you are making sure that you're getting the right balance of protein, fat, carbs, vegetables, all of that. Again, you're already 10 steps ahead. Focusing on green leafy vegetables, which is going to help with our vitamins, our minerals, our antioxidants, our anti-inflammatory compounds, all of that. A lot of people ask me, can I eat broccoli? Can I eat cruciferous vegetables? Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Broccoli, everyone.
Those cruciferous vegetables have that precursor for what most people take as a supplement, DIM, right? So, really, really helpful for your hormones in general. in terms of, we talk about going gluten-free or dairy-free and cutting out foods and all of these things. So do I have time to kind of go into this a little bit?
No, of course. Just like I say for everyone, this is your live tonight, and it was what we had time for. And then what we would bring you back if there was any like other pendings, because 45 minutes to do everything isn't enough time. So yes, you're live. On you go.
I can seriously talk about all of this stuff for sure. Okay, so we do not have conclusive research on many of these things. However, we do know that nightshades are not bad for you. That's kind of taken out of context.
Exactly.
The literature only shows that these foods, like you look at like tomatoes and eggplants, whatever, these foods all have
a lot of people won't know what nightshades are. Just a quick 2-second rundown. What would
tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. So those foods actually contain a lot of great nutrients for you, and they're not going to cause inflammation. So that was kind of like the theory behind like the AIP diet and all of that, which is really antiquated at this point, in my opinion. And then we also have, lectins and whatever. No, you're fine. You're fine. There's not, the amount of lectins you would have to eat in order to have a problem is just absurd. In terms of gluten and dairy, we know from the literature that unless you have lactose intolerance, dairy is not going to increase your thyroid antibodies. So if you're lactose intolerant, you might want to avoid it for that purpose. But otherwise, I've always included dairy. And in fact, it causes me to have way less stress when I eat. It's a great source of protein, great source of calcium, great source of magnesium. Obviously choose better sources of dairy as you can. But there's no reason to necessarily eliminate it. And then with gluten, there's 2 big reasons why you would want to eliminate, 2 confirmed reasons and then 1 theory about why you would want to remove gluten when you have Hashimoto's. So the 2 confirmed reasons are you have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Celiac disease, you get a biopsy, you determine if you have celiac disease. And these 2 things are very common in Hashimoto's too, I might add. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity, you can't really test for this. Our food sensitivity tests that we have are not accurate. They're not evidence-based. They're not showing you any definitive pieces of information. So with that being said, what I always recommend is people do a trial. So that you do a 6-month trial of going gluten-free. Of course, it's not a magic bullet. So if you're gluten-free, but you're skipping meals or you're only eating processed foods, you're not moving, you're, not doing any of the other things, then it's not going to be helpful for you. And so what I recommend is kind of layering all those nutrition habits and movement habits and all that on, and then doing that gluten-free trial and seeing what your antibodies do, right? Because we want to see if there's even impact. We want to also see what your symptoms are and how you feel. The third theory that, again, like they need to do more research on us. Like, I feel like we're so underfunded when it comes
join the club with that one. It's like,
but the theory is molecular mimicry. And so what that means is there's a protein in gluten called gliadin that mimics the thyroid tissue. So the theory is when you eat gluten, it triggers that autoimmune response and can cause more damage to the thyroid. Again, this is not something that has been proven, but this has been a theory that's been a theory for well over a decade.
So if anything anecdotal can maybe help you and you feel better, then of course you keep doing it. It's like a case by case basis to do things.
I will say that for many people, going gluten-free is a game changer for them. And that is why I still recommend it to the extent that I do, even, despite the fact that we don't have any confirmed, everyone with Hashimoto should do this. I always recommend the trial just because I've seen so many people come through my practice that have really benefited from it. And then also even, on social media talking to me that have really benefited from it.
No, that's cool. Because I think you've also come across, I really want everyone to sort of learn about your sort of story. And I think we do have time, because we can spend the next 5 minutes talking about this. And then if you do have any questions for Ingrid, guys, please drop them in the comments, because we'll be answering your questions for the last 10 minutes of it. But what I think you'll find interesting is the part of trauma with your thyroid and Hashimoto's, and obviously PCOS as well. So I'll let Ingrid tell her, because it's her story, but it's
Yeah. Yeah, and I will do my best to get through this without being emotional and crying. But if I do, I know that this is a safe space. So my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, a rare genetic form of lung cancer. He was 40 years old at the time in 2020, and he battled cancer for 3 years, and he passed away in September of 2022. And so, you know, there's a couple things that I think are really important to get out of this. Is one, when you are put in the position of one, dealing with that emotional trauma, and then two, you go from having a partner to being a caretaker, there's a lot of stress that goes into that. And I think that a lot of so two things that I'm grateful for in this process. One, I had already put the work in and laid the foundation. So my body was like, am I allowed to curse on this?
Of course.
Okay. It was really
keep it.
No, I was really fucking healthy, and I'm so grateful for that, because I had the energy to do everything that I needed to do for Mike to help him through this process, right? Not only just in the day-to-day, but driving to appointments. I don't think people realize how much cancer takes over your life in terms of doctor's appointments, and they don't do a great job of condensing things. So you're driving an hour, 2 hours every single day. Chemo treatments are 5-6 hours. Wow. This was smack in the middle of COVID. So I wasn't even allowed to go in with him. So I would literally wait in the parking lot for 5-6 hours, you know, because we lived far from where he got treatment. So one, I'm very, very grateful that I took the time to figure out how to take care of my body before that point. And I was in a really, really good place. You know, obviously not emotional getting that type of information, but health-wise. The second thing is trauma impacts your body and your brain so severely, and people don't realize this. So after the fact, I experienced, like, I couldn't remember, like, after he passed, I couldn't remember anything. Literally my entire, could not remember anything. And so what trauma and grief does is it can actually shrink your frontal lobe. So you literally get like changes in your brain from trauma and grief. It also, of course, leads to, it can lead to gut issues. It can lead to mineral deficiencies. It can lead to all of these things. And again, one of my biggest flexes is the fact that I've been able to stay in Hashimoto's remission through all of this. And the reason why I was able to do that was because I took the time to build that foundation of metabolic wellness. I'm also fortunate that I do what I do. So I knew what I needed to kind of focus on, right? In terms of, I knew that my body,
no, I'm just saying you had the foundation to do that. So that's how you were able, even though you were probably autopilot the whole way through it, but then when you were coming out the other side, you were able to build that up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And trauma is a trigger for autoimmune diseases, and a lot of people get diagnosed after suffering a trauma. So that's something just to consider. And, you know, so one of the things that I did in this time was, and I know there were people that was like, you're insane. What are you doing? It's been a week. And I'm like, I moved my body every single day, no matter what that looked like, whether it was yoga or walking, or, you know, if I felt up to it, strength training, but I moved my body every single day. And that was really, really important. And then the other thing that I think was really, really helpful in this time was making sure that I was continuing to hydrate and electrolytes, because I don't think people realize that when you have higher levels of stress, your body's kind of going to burn through those electrolytes a little bit faster too.
Yeah, but even women in general, this is how I actually advise all the women coming through the program, that electrolytes, and women doing I don't know if you've heard of the magic drink, but it's got electrolytes in it.
Yeah.
But even women in their luteal phase of their period, they burn through more electrolytes. So it's more important. So if we're burning through it naturally in our periods, can you imagine what trauma is actually doing to it? It's probably depleting you of all those essential minerals. We need sodium, guys, to live. Your body will not operate without sodium. So don't be scared of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what we can do, like your story is, it's obviously very, very sad, and it shows about the trauma, and you're obviously very visibly upset too, but the trauma, and a lot of these women, we don't realize that trauma can be this major trigger, like for your PCOS or Hashimoto's, but then the doctors really dismiss that as well, which is a big problem. Or you'll be sent away with, I don't know if doctors do this for Hashimoto's too, just go and lose weight, you're fine, you're obviously eating too many calories, or you need to do this sort of exercise for that. So,
and I think a lot of times too, like trauma and grief are such a trigger for Hashimoto's. So, but also the symptoms of grief and trauma are so mirrored to Hashimoto's symptoms. So I think that there might be missed diagnoses in that as well.
Okay. So I would really like to help, like, the women who are still watching this. So just from like a few steps, if someone had, say, PCOS, or they're like, oh God, I really feel like there's something wrong even with my thyroid, and it was going to be their first visit at the doctor, their very first visit, what would you recommend that they say to the doctor to get the doctor to either listen to them or take them seriously?
Yeah. So first things first, I think, is a little bit of like, which is what we're doing here, right? Is that gathering of like pre-information, right? And kind of like armoring yourself with knowledge so that you can go in feeling empowered and strong in your conversation. So a lot of times doctors don't want to check antibodies because they're like, well, we're not going to do anything about it, right? We're not doing anything about it. If your TSH is too high, we're going to medicate you. But there's no medication for thyroid antibodies. So what I generally recommend that my clients do is, when they want labs that their doctor doesn't necessarily want to check, or if there's not going to be something that a doctor has kind of control over fixing, I tell them to approach it from the angle of, I know that you're not going to do anything with this number. However, I want to know what's going on in my body, right? Or I'm making these nutrition changes and I want to see how it's impacting my body. I really think that I have this condition. And push for it. You're allowed to, right? You're allowed to push for information about your own body.
Yeah, and especially like over here, what if they go to the doctor and they get their TSH tested and it's within normal range, but you're really feeling shit, but they might say, oh, you're on the borderline, here is some levothyroxine for you, because that's what I'm on, guys, levothyroxine, and it can jump up and down all the time, your levels. So what would you do for that? And this hopefully help the women.
Yeah. So first of all, the range for TSH is obnoxiously broad and isn't really specified on where you feel your best. It's more like where you're going to stay alive. It's a little bit more narrow than that, but truly it's not focused on where you're going to feel your absolute best. And again, TSH is only a lab that shows that communication between your pituitary and your thyroid. It's not, it's not a lab that shows your active thyroid hormone, right? I am not against T4 medication at all. It is the most tested, it's the most observed, and I think the problem is we know from the literature, we know from practice, I've seen this for a decade myself, Hashimoto's and PCOS is not just a medical issue. It's a multidisciplinary disease, right? So you need to have a good doctor, you need to have a good dietitian, because that conversion of T4 to T3, that happens in your gut, your kidneys, and your liver, right? Which means we need to optimize the health of your gut, your kidneys, and your liver, which happens through nutrition and lifestyle. So I'm not against, like, I know that T3 medications have been seriously life-changing for some people, so I'm not discounting that by any stretch of the imagination, but I also am not jumping on the bandwagon of T4 medication is garbage and it's not helpful. And, because that's not necessarily true. And I've seen people have just as many issues with T3 medication as T4 medication for other reasons. So the idea here is, yes, get your labs under control. Get, if you need supplemental thyroid hormone, get supplemental thyroid hormone. And then do the work that you need to do to optimize your health and your body so that you can utilize that thyroid hormone properly.
Okay. And can you be in remission to not use medication at all? Or does it get to the point where you have to take medication, but you feel good?
Yeah. So there is a small percentage of people that can completely come off medication. The issue is, remember in the beginning when we talked about how it can take a decade for your thyroid antibodies to cause hypothyroidism? Well, a lot of times the damage is already done. And at the end of the day, you need thyroid hormone no matter how you get it, right? Whether it's synthetic or natural. So if the damage is already done and it's irreparable, then you need to continue on that medication. Now, I've had lots of clients who are able to come down on medication or completely get rid of it. But realistically, it's a small percentage of people.
Oh God, that would be nice. So, and just guys, if you've got questions, remember we've got another 5 minutes to have Ingrid here before she has to dash off. So please get your questions in if you want to know anything about like the thyroid and that. But what came to my head there was if PCOS women, because up to 70% of PCOS women can get fatty liver disease or sluggish liver, problems with their liver. So then that would affect the conversion of their thyroid hormones from T4 to T3. So really, in effect, you guys with PCOS will have to be really focused on your liver health. So a liver function test and just nutrition for that as well. Do you find that like nutrition and fatty liver, is that all linked with your findings?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And really, I'm sure that you go over this in your program too, just to how to optimize liver health. But something really, really easy is adding in just bitter greens, like arugula or something into your nutrition, as much as you can.
Yeah, no, we're all about, because actually we've someone had comment, I can't see who it is, sorry guys, but thanks for sharing. We have 5 steps in the program, just like you have your 4 pillars. We have 5 steps that we get everyone to learn and do and take on board. It lasts them a lifetime. So it's the same principle. And someone said there that they're building up the 5 steps habits and it's going to last them a lifetime.
Awesome.
This is what we do. So nutrition is one of ours for that as well. So, and it's the basics. You're very similar to us. So right, what we'll do, we'll get questions in, guys, if you want to ask Ingrid. And like you say, we will bring her back because we haven't even touched the surface.
I know.
You know what? We could actually have talked about just one thing the whole time that we've been talking, even like with symptoms. So while you're like getting in your questions there, because I can't see anything that we haven't answered already. I see something about everyone saying hi and about using dairy. I knew that was going to be a big one, dairy and gluten. So I'm glad that you actually agree. Dairy I don't agree about cutting out. I normally don't agree about gluten, but I do agree with that for Hashimoto's and the thyroid, and of course for celiac. So we are on the same page there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, I know that there are people out there that, have people go gluten-free for any type of reason, right? Inflammation or bloating or whatever. And I don't think that's appropriate because, again, we need a variety of food to feed the diversity of our microbiota. And the question about the perfume.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. So this is one of those things where it's not the most important thing, but it can be a important things. So those forever chemicals that are used in certain shampoos, conditioners, soaps, household products, perfumes. Yeah, they can potentially be an endocrine disruptor. They can potentially impact thyroid function. I would look into the specific perfume itself, because I do know that the industry has kind of caught on to the fact that we're catching on to this. And so there definitely, has been progression here in terms of not including some of those forever chemicals into.
Yeah. So we have got a long one there. We can answer that, and I can't see who it is, but I'm actually going to guess it's Claire that's possibly asking that. I'll check after to see if I'm right. But just something regarding it was perfume, just quickly for my own benefit. So when we're cutting out these endocrine disruptors, is it when you've already been diagnosed, or would you try and cut them out just as a preventative measure? Before, like if you didn't have any Hashimoto's problems, would you bother about these?
If you've already done all of the other things and it's not causing you insane amounts of stress, then I mean, why not, right? But again, it's kind of the cherry on top. It's not the end all be all. Like if you are cutting out perfume, but you're still eating garbage.
It's
not going to make
I'm glad that you said that, because that is on the same page, because I have seen a creator say that you can't even touch till receipts, and that's how far they were going, like shops. So I was like, no, that's taking it too far now,
Right. And that's, I think, what the issue is a lot of times when you're scrolling through social media is, people get a lot of traction over like shock value and being extreme. But when it comes to real life, that's not how we walk through life, right? That there's no way to be that extreme in our day.
Stressed out. You're like, oh my God, I've just touched till receipts. I've just used perfume. You would get yourself all worked up.
And I feel very strongly about a stress management first approach, where I even did a TikTok about this the other day, where we were talking about going gluten-free. And, so many people are like, you have to go gluten-free if you have Hashimoto's. For me, I have that conversation with my clients and I ask them, like, what is your stress level on this, right? Because even though someone might have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, if the idea of going gluten-free is sending them into like a mental spiral, what? We're going to start with eating breakfast first. We're going to start with first. And then depending on how things go and how you feel, then we can start to revisit this again.
Good. I love that, because it's in the hormone hierarchy. That's I teach it, but it is something well known online. It's like cortisol is at the bottom of the hormone hierarchy, so you need to get your cortisol in check first, and that has that knock-on effect for that. So I don't think we've actually got time to answer the big long one question there, unless it's a very simple question, because Ingrid has got another call after this.
Let's answer the that's a little bit more involved. So let's answer should we do exercise?
Which one?
What type of exercise?
So let's do that one, and then that'll be the last one, guys. But
awesome. I do apologize that this is a little bit of a shorter one, but I have a client right after this. Let's talk about exercise. So at the end of the day, movement is movement. I want all of my clients to have movement as part of their daily thing. So that's actually one of my 4 pillars is movement. So the last 2 pillars are movement and supplementation, right? So movement is movement. But when it comes to like, what is the best movement? I definitely want my people to be strength training. I definitely want that to happen for a couple of different reasons. One, when you have Hashimoto's, you're at higher risk of losing muscle faster. So we know that once we hit 30, our muscle starts to kind of decrease, right? So we want to make sure that we're increasing our muscle mass. not only from a health standpoint and a balance standpoint and a longevity standpoint, but also from a weight management standpoint, right? We want to increase that basal metabolic rate. It's also great for our insulin sensitivity to have more muscle. So, you know, definitely recommend strength training. In terms of, is running bad for you? This is very specific to the person and what's going on with you, and how much and how long are you running? Can you go for, you know, a run a couple times a week and not like totally explode your Hashimoto's? Absolutely. If you're someone that's marathon training while also going through a stressful time, and you know, you're not eating well, you're not fueling well, you know, that can cause a lot of issues. And we do know that people that are more endurance athletes, they can have symptoms like weight loss resistance, because there's a metabolic adaptation that happens. So I have a lot of people that come to me that are like, I'm running 47,000 miles a week and I can't lose weight. Well,
our bodies are machines. This is the way we talk about it. What you do 1 month, you can burn 1,000 calories, but your body adapts and becomes the machine that what you do the next month, you have to maybe do 3 times as much movement just to get the same calorie burn or effect from it. That's what our bodies do. They're built for that. Endurance, but obviously, you don't want to be doing more when you don't have to, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I'm very lazy when it comes to maintenance, because we do this every day, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing the things that are the most bang for our buck.
Of course.
Like, one, enjoying your fitness. You have to figure out how to enjoy it, because otherwise you're not going to be consistent with it. And then I think just focusing on all the things, again, that just like give you the biggest bang for your buck is also really, really important.
Of course. My question always is, before we finish up though, for someone that asks me, is running bad? Because I do get asked this quite often. I ask them, do you want to do it? Do you enjoy doing it? And if their answer is no, and I'm like, don't do it, do strength training and just walk. But if they say, well, yes, I get a lot of mental health benefits from it and I do it, I'm like, yes, you can incorporate it in, but just be sensible with it. So that is always my question for that one.
For sure.
Yeah, so be smart about it, guys. So, but that's awesome. So, Ingrid, thanks so much for coming to join us. But let's see what we'll do, probably in about maybe even a month's time or something. We can bring you back and we can have a more sort of dialed in episode. So if you had any questions about even thyroid or Hashimoto's, or even just about what's the best nutrition that you can do, and more guidance about that. But it's getting the ball rolling about like, what even is Hashimoto's? Why is it related to PCOS? And all of these things. So if we can get you asking the questions that can help you with the doctor as well. So this is what we're aiming to be doing. So it was really awesome, guys. That was so good. So why don't, if you're watching this later, remember on the replay. But also, if you do want to learn more from Ingrid, you will find the link to her TikTok profile under all of the posts that I've done. So you can find her, probably not on Facebook, but if you head over to her TikTok, give her a little follow. And she posts, like me, lots of awesome free help for Hashimoto's. So you can hit her up there, and I will bring her back. I will bring her back. So Ben, thanks for opening up, because that was hard. I seen you were getting a little bit emotional, but that's understandable for that. But yes, we're all here to help support you and things. So
well, thank you for having me. And I just feel like it's an important thing to talk about, even though it's hard for me still to talk about. But I think it's very important for everyone to realize that one, grief and trauma happen. They're normal and they're not fun, but you can stay healthy through it, and you can get through it.
Yes. Yeah. So that's an important lesson to learn, but for everyone. But thanks so much, guys. I better go and let Ingrid get a pee and a cuppy before our next call. And thanks for watching tonight. We really, really appreciate it. And if you get value from this, please do ask questions below, and even share this to other people who you think that it might help. So go and enjoy the rest of your Monday night, and thanks for joining us on your Monday night. We appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, everyone.